here.
Don't forget to grab your...
Yeah. Oh,
We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. First order of business to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We have the flag in front of us and then off to the side as well. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everyone to our July meeting. Roll call of the members, please, and board members, please, if you could remember to unmute your microphone.
Sarah Sarda,
here.
Terry Crandall,
Here.
Kathy Greenaway,
Here,
Franny Kiefer,
Here.
Jill Sternquist.
Here.
and we do have a quorum. Next item up on the agenda is to approve the agenda that is before us. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda before us. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Sarda,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway.
Yes. Item number 3 is to approve the minutes from our June 8th, 2020 regular school board meeting. Is there an approval?
I
Or
make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 13th, 2020 regular school board meeting.
Second.
Did you mean the June 8th?
Oh, I'm sorry, the June 8th.
Okay, so to approve the June 8th, 2020 regular school board meeting minutes, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Sarda,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway.
Yes. Item number 4 is that point in the meeting where we disclose any direct or indirect conflicts before us. Does any board member have a conflict they need to disclose? Hearing none, we will move on to item number 5, which is to approve the financial statement for June and the bills for July.
I'll make a motion to approve the financial statement for June 2020 and the bills for July 2020.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the financials for June and the bills for July. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Sarda,
Yes.
Greenaway.
Yes. Item number 6 on the agenda is the oath of office. And Jason, I believe you are going to help with that.
Up front, is that?
Myself set up here. Okay, so if we want to go maybe more center. Okay, if you would please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, please state your name,
I, Franny Kiefer,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
to support the Constitution of the United States
to support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota,
and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota,
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties as a member of the school board
and that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties as a member of the school board
of the Yankton School District 63-3 to the best of my ability,
of the Yankton School District 63-3 to the best of my ability,
in accordance with the laws now in effect
in accordance with laws now in effect,
and hereafter to be enacted during the continuance as a member of this elected board.
and hereafter to be enacted during my continuance as a member of this elected board.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Franny, on another 3 years on the board with us. That's great. Okay, item number 7 is to adjourn the board meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn for our meeting. Roll call?
Sternquist,
Yes.
Sarda,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Greenaway.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I will, as business manager and acting chair, first order of business, call to order for the 2020-21 fiscal year. And first order of business is to nominate or accept nominations for the position of chair of the school board. With that, are there any nominations for chair?
I will nominate Sarah Sarda for president of the school board.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any additional nominations? Hearing none, I would ask for a unanimous ballot, and I will call the roll. Greenaway,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
and Sarda.
Abstain.
Okay, Member Sarda is elected chair.
Don't shake your hand. All right, as my first duty, I just want to thank Kathy for her last year's leadership as the chair of our board. She did an excellent job in difficult times. All right, our first item up for business is to nominate and elect a vice president of the board. This is an action item. Do I hear any nominations?
I'll make a motion to nominate Dr. Jill Sternquist for vice president.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, roll call please, Jason.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Abstain.
and Sarda.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to our consent agenda before us. This is an action item. I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call please. Jason?
Sternquist,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Moving on to item number 10, school opening fall 2020. I will turn this over to Dr. Kindle to talk about the plan.
I think I'm going to go to the podium. In order to make this a little bit easier for all of you to follow along, I've got a little bit of a slideshow, and when we're done with that, it'll transition to a 2 or 3 page document, and we'll walk through that and talk about some of the things that we've been working on as a district as we prepare to enter school this next fall, which, by the way, is not very long away. And we haven't even graduated officially our seniors yet from this past school year, but that will be coming up in a couple of weeks. I want to start out with the slideshow, and I just want to show you a timeline of different events that have been taking place since we got out of school. Well, we were out of school for the 4th quarter, but when we officially had our last day in May. So I'm going to walk you through some dates here of information and informing the public of different things that we've been doing in the last 6 or 7 weeks. So Jason, if you'd go to the next slide. First thing that we did was on May 22nd, we sent out a survey, and we asked our parents to participate in a survey regarding coming back in the fall, some things that we would take a look at based upon what we got back from the survey. And one of the things that I'll tell you that if I had to do the survey over again, I would have made it pretty clear in there that the purpose of the survey was based on we are going to be in school, and if we couldn't be, then these are the things in the survey that we want you to respond to. That's something that I heard back from a handful of parents that if I had to do it over again, I would have added that comment. So on May 22nd, we sent out a survey for parent input. We got the results back. We posted those results on June 3rd. On June 12th, next slide, I sent a message out to parents letting them know that we were going to form work groups, and we had a scope of work that we wanted these groups to work on, and that they would report back to the administration. We would sit down, take a look at these recommendations, and then have further discussion like we are tonight at the school board meeting. The other thing that I wanted people to know was that it was also an opportunity in this message to please reach out to your building principals if you had any other input that you would like to share as part of these work groups. The work groups were primarily made up of teachers in the district with administrators, and if you were part of that work group tonight, would you just raise your hand? 'Cause I think we have a number of them here. So thank you for being here. Next slide. The P&D also did a really good job then on June 17th. They took a lot of the information from the message to parents, put it into a really nice article, asked me a few questions, they printed it, and it was another opportunity to get this information out not only to parents but the public that we were working on plans for re-entry next fall. Next slide. On June 25th, I had an Alive at 5 program with David Leonard. I just had somebody, when I was coming into the meeting tonight, said that they just heard it today. I think that they rerun those. But if you haven't had an opportunity to listen to that, you should go on the KYNT website. There's some really good information that we talked about, and it's another opportunity for parents in the community to hear some of the things that we were discussing. Next slide. Also on June 25th, I worked with YAPG and the Chamber, and we put together a Zoom meeting. And the purpose of the Zoom meeting is what it says up there, that we want to work and collaborate with our parents during this COVID-19. And we had a good discussion with some of the largest employers in Yankton. Matter of fact, I think there were 24 people on the Zoom meeting. I believe 18 to 20 of those were represented by some of our largest employers in Yankton. And what came out of that was a discussion about how the employers could help us to work with you as parents in the event that we would either have to close or do an alternating schedule of every other day. Next slide. I also had a Zoom meeting on July 1st with the Yankton Ministerial Association, and that was a really productive meeting. We talked about how they could help us at school, help us communicate with parents. And again, the theme was to collaborate and work on this together as a community. And I just want to thank the Ministerial Association. I think we probably had 14 to 16 different people that were part of that meeting. And I just want to thank them for the support that we had from them. And as we move forward. Next slide. These are some different meetings that I've been part of as superintendent. We've had weekly meetings with the Department of Ed. We have a large school superintendent group that meets nearly every week. We also have we had a return to school meeting with the South Dakota Department of Health. Kathy Wagner and I were part of that in this past week. We've also had Yankton County COVID-19 Task Force weekly meetings. We've had administrator meetings. And we've had really good communication and support from Dr. Pietla from YMC, Dr. Scott Hiltonen from Vera Sacred Heart, who is also our county health officer. And I see that Dr. Pietla is here tonight, and I just want to thank him for being here tonight as part of this meeting. Next slide. These were a couple of meeting notices that were sent out last week regarding tonight's meeting and a special school board meeting that we'll have this Thursday here in the theater at 5 o'clock. And we are again going to discuss some of the things that we're talking about now. And we'll really open that up for a lot of public input and any Q&A from the parents that are in attendance or community members. And the last slide is just kind of a repeat, but just shows you that, again, we'll have that special school board meeting coming up on Thursday. All right, so we want to get into a little bit more detail about some of the return to school this next fall. And I've got a document that Jason will call up.
It is on my screen. Matt, do you have something that we can do to lose it on the screen? I can't see the front.
It's not up there, but I'll start walking through it.
Is it connection over here?
So, as I said earlier, we had summer work groups that consisted of staff from all of our elementary schools, middle school and high school, along with school administrators who worked really hard at working on different areas that we had assigned them. And these are the areas, these are things that we talked about, and particularly, what will our Yankton School District online learning plan and take-home packet look like if we have to get into a situation where we are alternating days or we have to shut down school. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. We're going to have representatives from that committee, administrators, get up and talk about a few of those points. We also had groups and different people in the district working on technology, because if we have to go online, like we did last quarter of school, what can we do better to provide technology to our students, and not only computers, but internet access at home. We are also going to talk a little bit tonight about the health safety. We've got some people working on that. Mental wellness. That's a really important part of all of this, is taking care of our kids and our families. Transportation. We've had a lot of questions about, are buses going to run in the country? Are we going to continue our pickup spots here in town? And we'll talk about more about that in a little bit. Buildings and grounds. What have we been doing to prepare our buildings and grounds? Food service. That's important to all of our families and our kids, that we're able to feed our kids, whether we're in school or whether parents choose to keep kids home. Activities. We're in the midst of that now with summer activities and practices, different trainings that are going on with different groups. And then, of course, the one that I mentioned first is the online learning. So, I'm going to just give a few highlights of things that I want all of you to know that we've decided as we've moved along here in the last 6 to 7 weeks. Our work groups, again, presented information, worked on it hard, brought it back to the admin team, and we've narrowed it down to 3 things when we return to school this next fall. One is to be in school and at school with students and staff. That's an option that we have. We also have a second one, which is alternating days, every other day, for a period of time with approximately half the students one day and half the next day, keeping families together on the same days, which includes going to school on Fridays as part of the alternating days. The third option is school is closed for a period of time and we implement our Yankton School District online education learning plan and take-home packets for all students. We could also have this, as noted. We could have scenarios where a classroom is quarantined in a particular building is closed for a period of time, or the entire school district is closed for a period of time. And I can tell you that we will also have probably situations where kids are quarantined and classrooms and schools remain open. We could even close an entire elementary building for a period of time and keep the rest of our school up and running. So as of tonight, our first day of school is planned for August 24th, and the plan is to begin school at school with students and staff on August 24th as planned according to our school calendar. If we have changes locally in our COVID-19 cases or spread of COVID-19, hospitalizations, etc., which are all of concern for the safety of our students and staff, this may change. I will continue to consult with the South Dakota Department of Health and our local health care professionals on making this decision. Next slide, please. We know that there are going to be parents who are concerned with their children coming back to school on August 24th. We want to work with those parents. We want them to have that option to choose that if they're not comfortable, that their children could be at home, use our Yankton School District online education learning plan, and take home packets. This may be fluid as COVID-19 changes, so these kids may return to school at any time. Perhaps they would start 2 weeks later doing the online, come back for a month. Maybe they would be out 2 weeks, and we're going to continue to work with parents. The important thing for everybody to know is that we want kids to be educated. We want them to have an opportunity to either be in school or be at home learning. Masks are going to be highly recommended for our students at school. An emphasis with middle school and high school students giving their mobility during the day. Also knowing that we will do what we can to limit some of that mobility. I was the middle school principal for 14 years. I was the high school principal for 6. And I can tell you, to try to completely redo a schedule at the high school so that there's limited or no mobility for those students is almost impossible. So masks are going to be very important for our high school kids and our middle school students. We are also going to highly recommend that our elementary students wear them, but knowing that it's going to be difficult for a little preschool or kindergartner to keep a mask on every moment of the day, all day. So in addition to masks in the elementary, we are purchasing desk shields, which will be provided in the elementary classrooms, knowing that this will help a bit with the mask use. And those desk shields have been ordered and should be here for day one. Outside visitors will be strictly limited to essential services that some of our students may need. Transportation will be offered, as we have in the past, in the rural areas and with our in-town busing pickups, knowing that this is a provided service and parents may choose not to have their children ride the buses. Meals will be provided to students at school and a grab-and-go offering to students at home who are registered in the Yankton School District. That's really important. The summer program that we had with food service that Sandy and her staff did such a terrific job with was really open to any student, regardless of where they were enrolled. But when we get into the school year, we have to keep track, and so you have to be a registered student in order to receive those grab-and-go meals if you're at home. Lastly, working directly with the South Dakota Department of Health, again with our local healthcare professionals, will continue. And we will do that daily if needed as we get school started. We're now going to do an overview of the red highlighted areas that you see. And we're going to start with our Yankton School District Online Education Learning Plan take-home packets. Now, before we get into this, we know this. We know that the best educational scenario for students to learn is to be at school with their teachers. However, given we were out of school an entire quarter of school when we implemented our online education learning take-home packets, we knew that we wanted to find out, how did we do? Were those packets effective? What are things that we can do differently? So one of the things that we did in June is we tested a number of students with our NWEA testing. And I'm going to have Nicole Volness speak to that and just give us a real brief highlight of what those results were. So if Nicole would come up, please.
All right, so when I looked at the results for NWEA, we took a sampling of students from grades first grade from last year, first grade through seventh grade. And like Dr. Kendall said, we wanted to really look at our instructional impact from our alternative learning plan, but also we use the results every year to look at our instructional needs for students as well as curriculum needs. So you can see in the top table, the math results show our mean RIT score, and RIT is just the scale measure that NWEA uses. So you can see from spring of last year to spring of this year, the comparison by grade level. Also included in that third column is the sample group size, and our classrooms typically hold about 200 students. And then you can see the norm RIT level by grade level as well. So those are national norms. NWEA is given across several states in the United States. And then the final two columns show the percentage of students scoring at or above grade level for our spring scores and students that met their expected RIT growth in spring testing. There's a lot of information to unpack when we look at our NWEA scores, and so this is just a very high-level overview of them. One thing that we did notice overall as a school district is that our spring 2019-2020 scores exceeded our spring 2018-2019, and also our grade levels exceeded the norm RIT at the national level. So we dove into those scores and the data more closely in our work groups, but we are very proud of the partnership that we had with our parents and our community to make these scores come out in our sample group. The same held true with reading as well, the same column headings, and then the same generalizations can be made that our 2019-2020 RIT scores exceeded our 2018-2019 RIT score, and we also exceeded the national score by grade level.
Nicole, just in general speaking then, what we found out from these results with using our online learning and the packets probably exceeded what we thought would happen to go back and reassess the students on
Sure.
how they did.
So one of the reasons we really wanted to test a sample size for our students is, again, we always use our data to drive our instructional decisions as well as our curriculum resources. But a lot of information, and we know this too, without our kids being in classrooms for fourth quarter, there was a lot of projections that there was going to be a lot of learning loss. And so in order to effectively plan for instruction next year with our teachers and administratively, we needed to take a sample size to see how the instruction that we provided to our students through our alternative learning plan impacted their student growth during fourth quarter. So we were very happy to see these scores, that our students didn't have the learning loss in Yankton that has been projected nationally. And that's because of the work plans that were delivered by classroom teachers, and being sure that we focused on quality instruction, being sure that we focused on fourth quarter standards, and that our learning was the best possible that we could provide for our students at home, just like we would during the school day.
So I just want to tell you, it's a real compliment to our teachers. It's a compliment to our teachers and to our parents who were home dealing with a lot on their plate, that you did a remarkable job with your kids at home. And I just want to commend you and thank you for what you did at home. And again, knowing that that's not the ideal situation that any of us want, and that's why we're going to try to get back to school. Our plan is to go back to school on the 24th so that the kids can be with their teachers. So with that, I'll quickly open it up to board members if you have any questions for Nicole, and then I'll have the 4 elementary principals come up to the podium and talk a little bit, some of your highlights on the things that your group discussed and what we decided administratively.
I have quite a few questions, so I won't waste any time tonight with that, Nicole, as you probably can imagine. But I'd like to email you tomorrow offline and talk about them. But could I have a copy of those? I don't know if I have this document.
I'm not sure if you do. I can certainly send it to you. There's a lot more that goes into our scores. For example, just looking at the last 2 columns of percentages, the percent of students scoring at or above the grade level norm. And then if you look at the next column, the percentages might seem low in some areas. And this is why it's very important for our teachers to unpack individually their students' scores as well, because a student may score at the 89th percentile in fall, and then to continue to show growth, they need to continue to score at the 89th percentile, which is very high for a grade level. And so if in the spring they score at the 87th percentile, that last column would not calculate them as showing growth, even though scoring at the 87th percentile at the end of the year is still an amazing job from students and teachers' instruction. And so there's just a lot of information as you unpack the data that can clarify, but yet muddy the waters as well when we look at data. So this is a high-level overview, but the main point, like Dr. Kindle said, is that we wanted to make sure that the instruction we were providing for our students was going to continue to show growth, and that's exactly what it did. We wanted to make sure that we continue to use the instructional delivery methods that are best practices for students while they're at home learning, and being sure we're providing resources to parents and families so that they can help us with that. And so overall, like Dr. Kindle said, we couldn't have done it without the work of our teachers and our parents to see those growth scores like we did.
Thank you. While Nicole's leaving, if the 4 elementary principals would come up. And then I have one more other comment I want to make regarding the scores. We did have a number of students who did not participate at the level that we wanted them to during the 4th quarter. And those students, because they did not participate, were not part of the testing, because we knew that if they did not participate, the likelihood of their scores doing anything would not mean much regarding what we had done online. But we're working on that as well, on how can we, when we return in the fall, really reach out to these kids that weren't participating at the level that we wanted them to, and how can we work with them to continue to improve and do well in school, because that's a bit of a loss of achievement for those students. And we're concerned about that, and we're working on that with our work groups. Mr. Clownish.
Good evening, board. I feel like I should have everyone click their mute button in case somebody makes noise, but it's been that long, having been in Zoom for the last 5 months, that it's a little bit more vulnerable up here, and I haven't been in a group that's been this large for the last 5 months. And I think our kids are going to feel that way a little bit too, and our teachers. There's been some sleepless nights, and we know that kids are going to have a lot of apprehension going back to the classroom, but one of the exciting things I think is that's what we do is teach kids, and to get them back into the classroom is going to be exciting. A couple of the things from our work group that one of the areas is our instructional content and how we're going to deliver that. And if we have kids there, all kids every day, we're going to be able to, of course, get into our instruction. We spent a lot of time in our work groups having some scope and sequence added to our 4 core areas of our science, social studies, language arts, and math. So at the end of the last year, it was difficult. Some of our schools were in different spots in their curriculum. So we want to make sure that wherever we are in our curriculum, if we have to go out for a few days or if we have to go out for a little bit of an extended time, that we can all stay together. So we really feel that that scope and sequence is going to help a lot. The other thing is a common platform. Our preschool through 2nd grade are going to be working with a program called Seesaw, and we really think that'll help parents if we are out of school or for the students who are out of school. It's a way to get information and homework back and forth, and it'll help in our communication. And our 3rd through 5th grade kids will be working on Google Classroom, and that'll also help the middle school because they'll be working on that at a later date. We also want to focus on our social and emotional learning, not having seen the kids for a while, and we know that there's going to be a lot of apprehension. We want to build that into our lessons, and our counselors have been doing a good job of really working with families, even outside of school, in school hours, in the summer, keeping everybody informed and communicating back and forth. When we actually get to that distance learning, we want to make sure that our lessons are differentiated, and the communication between parents is even better than we had before. So I think someone will be talking a little bit later what we're going to be doing there. And we also want to keep track of our packets. We didn't always know what kids were doing packets, what kids were doing online learning, and we want to do a better job of keeping track of that, making sure we get the work and homework back so that it's corrected and graded, and that communication is much better with parents and kids and teachers. Okay.
Good evening. A couple of things that I'll highlight. When I first talked to teachers about participating in these work groups, I was really happy that they were excited to be part of it. It's a little bit different coming in and working in these work groups during the summer. We're not always used to that. We have our workshops and additional training that we do, but our teachers were excited to be there each time we met. They were excited for the possibility of having students back, and they were excited to build on what they learned during that 4th quarter of doing distance education. And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet, within our groups, we also had our special education teachers represented in each group, and we also had counselors represented in each group. By hearing those different perspectives, I think it helps us tailor our alternative education plan by having those other voices. And our teachers did a nice job of compromising and trying to remember that we're trying to do what works best for our kids and our families. And one of the things that we did last spring was we did a teacher survey, and based upon that teacher survey, we started to formulate ideas of how we could make our distance learning plan better. So I'll just go over a few things in the area of teacher-student interaction. That's been one of the things that I've heard back from parents on, either through casual conversations or emails, is, boy, I wish we would have had maybe more videos or more chances for the teacher to interact. And I also had, boy, I was getting 3 phone calls a week, and it was too much, and I was trying to work it. So one of the things that we talked about was at the beginning of the year in the elementary doing a parent survey where we asked them, you know, what's your preferred method of communication? When are you available? What are your preferences as far as, you know, is it going to be a packet? Would you like to do the online? And, you know, knowing that each student is going to be a little bit different, each family is going to be different based upon their, if both parents are working, if they're working different hours. And so getting that feedback and getting to know our families is going to be extremely important at the beginning of this school year. We talked about teachers setting up regular Zoom meetings and phone calls and doing that with our at-home learners. Having flexible office hours, knowing that not everybody is going to be available to Zoom between 8 and 4. Not everybody is going to be able to communicate between those times, so having flexible office hours where kids can log in and ask questions. It doesn't have to be, you know, we had opportunities for some social interaction, but maybe thinking of it more as office hours where a student or a parent can log in, ask questions, communicate with the teacher, and that would maybe be in addition to that Zoom meetings. And then having some online learning guidelines and parental expectations and student expectations. We were new to this in March. We feel like we're going to be better at it if it happens again. So I participated in lots of different Zoom meetings, and sometimes it would be, you know, the dog barking right next to the kid, and it would be a challenge for learning to continue. Or it might be the student that you know, is still in bed or whatever. So just having some guidelines about, you know, how do you participate in distance learning? What are the expectations if we're doing a Zoom for our whole class, and defining those for our students and our parents. And then, you know, working on fostering relationships if you go to distance learning. That's, we've learned more about these chat rooms and Zooms and maybe breaking off into smaller groups so kids have more of a chance to talk. I would watch my own kids in Zoom meetings, and I'd participate in them myself. And it was interesting that some kids were very talkative and had lots of questions and lots to share, and others maybe just sat there and were a little bit intimidated with seeing 16 faces and not knowing when to jump in and talk. So we know that we can set up smaller groups, and kids will be more comfortable talking and socializing and sharing learning. So those are some of the things that we want to do, and our teachers are excited to try those things. At the end of this month, we have some training planned for our teachers, and that will be using technology, whether students are in school or doing distance learning, that these will be a benefit to us both ways. Another comment that we heard a lot was, you know, we want to give feedback to our students. We want to assess what they were doing. And when we left school in March, I know we were fearful of that transmission of papers going back and forth, and I think we've learned that we can do that safely now. So assessing what students are doing, understanding who's participating, and reaching out to those maybe that are not participating in the Zoom meetings, and making phone calls and finding ways to connect with those families.
Well, everything that I had on my list has now been checked off, thanks to Mr. Clemish and Mr. Mitzel. So I think, you know, in a nutshell, we really just want to help assure parents that we will do our very best to keep kids as safe as we can, social distance as best we can. Now, any of you who have been around 5, 6, and 7-year-olds know that
That's a little easier said than done, but most certainly we will do our best. We are currently working on recess schedules and lunch schedules, traffic flow in the building, bathroom breaks, just all of those little things that maybe the average person isn't thinking of. Also, one big concern that came out of the early childhood work group, which Mr. Bestie and I worked with, were all the manipulatives that our earliest learners use. So our 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds are using those things constantly. So coming up with a good plan, you know, for maybe not sharing those items, since a majority of their learning does take place through those. So yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we had to say. I don't know if Mr. Bestie had anything to add, but anybody have any questions or comments for us? I think probably the strangest thing will be when we first see the kids, because all of you have probably been at Walmart or Hy-Vee, and like it happened to me today. You know, when I saw a second grader and she looked at me and I looked at her and she wanted to embrace me, and we weren't really sure what was acceptable. So I think, especially after all this time, that our littlest learners just, they're anxious. I think the majority want to be around us, and so just assuring the parents that we'll do our very best to keep them as safe as we can. Thank you.
Good evening, Todd Duracek, principal at the middle school. As we got started with this process, you know, it was something that we talked about, and within our groups, we talked about making sure we were able to check mark all the boxes, all the what ifs. And you can play the what ifs out many, many different times, and what happens if this goes on and so forth. And my theme that we really talked about was, no matter what, we got to be able to we have to be able to check the box. Can that work? And so forth. So with the middle school, we're going to be looking at doing a few things a little bit differently as far as our schedule goes. The students are going to have the same opportunities, but it's going to look a little different than what they used to see in signing up for electives and so forth like that. So our schedules are going to be a little bit more condensed. They're going to be a little bit longer. And we talk about that too with mobility, you know, walking in the hallways a certain direction and walking so forth to, if we're able to pass through classes and so forth. So that's something that we've all really talked about. And the thing that I've said is the beauty about our plan is that no matter what the scenario is, we're going to be able to provide the education that we need to do for our students. And whether that's going to be in the classroom, whether that's our every other day that we get to see, or whether that's strictly online. And it doesn't matter where a student's quarantined to or a teacher's quarantined, we're going to be able to provide the education. And that's the thing that we feel that is the most important part in what we're doing. Our schedule, like I said, you know, it's going to be tweaked a little bit. The time frames are the same as far as the start of the day, the end of the day, but it's going to look. And really what we are doing, and our emphasis is we are going to team up. It's called a teaming strategy, where there's a certain amount of students that are assigned to a certain amount of teachers. And then it goes down even further, where a smaller amount of students is assigned to one teacher, and so forth. And those things are all going to be something that we're going to be able to do. We feel that we can do it well. We did it before at the middle school. Probably it was 12 years ago that we were able to do the teaming part of it. So we have some teachers that are familiar with it, and it's going to be something that we are able to look at to make sure that we're going to be able to offer all the things that we can continue to offer to our middle school students. So we're excited. Our group has worked hard. And like I said, we want to ensure that we're checking all the boxes. With this scenario, can this work? Are we going to be able to provide the education? And through our meetings, those were all yes. So, I mean, that's something that we're excited about. It is going to be a little bit different, and that's okay. It's just something that we're going to work through, and we'll be in good shape. So, any questions? All right, I'll have Dr. Jonke.
Good evening. At the high school level, we had all of the departments were represented in our committee. And the big thing with the committee is that they wanted the students to receive the same education, whether they were in the classroom or at home, depending on their situation. And so as a result, the teachers are going to all be recording all of their lessons and posting those to the website. So it's just like being in the classroom in the event that you're not able to be in the classroom. Also, we're going to use a consistent platform across the board. All of our teachers will use Google Classroom for the remote learning and turning in of assignments, etc. Although we will have the option of packets for those who are having issues with accessibility and things like that, or they just learn better having that paper packet in front of them. And it was referenced with the elementary principals earlier that we will be collecting those packets, and our goal would be to get those returned on a weekly basis so that there can be timely feedback given to the students. Now, there has been some discussion on what do we do with band, what do we do with music, what do we do with PE, and at the high school level, the students are earning credit toward graduation. And so they do have to have a PE credit. They do have to have fine arts credits. And so the committee felt that it was feasible to still offer those classes, but perhaps in a different way if those activities are not deemed as safe. So for example, the PE classes can focus on health curriculum. The music classes can focus on genres of music, history of music, percussion, or music theory, and look at those different activities to still get the fine arts credit and still offer those to our students. There is mobility among the high school students, as Dr. Kindle referenced. However, we are going to have one-way hallways so that students are moving one direction down the hallways, and we're also going to limit number of times that they're going to access their lockers. So we will be using backpacks to minimize those times that they're stopping at their lockers because those are very crowded areas. So we hope to minimize those interactions in doing that. Any questions? That's a great question. The question was lunches. So in visiting with Sandy Kramer, she found that we could handle about half of the students in the lunchroom at a time. And so our A lunch and C lunch are usually very large. We usually have about 350 to 380 students in each of those lunches. So we will be able to seat half of them each lunch, and the other half will be eating in their classroom. And we'll have a schedule to make it fair so that students have equal time in the classroom, teachers have equal time not eating lunch with their students, things like that. B lunch is a little bit smaller because that's only study halls, so we can more than likely have B lunch in the commons every day. But otherwise, we're going to have a schedule to rotate those students through. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Olson?
I'm always after Dr. Jonke, and I have to put this up so high. So, sorry. So I'm just here to talk about the technology. Matt and I have been working together. We've been talking to local internet companies, and so he wanted me to speak, so.
You have matching shirts almost.
We
so,
do, we
yeah,
planned it.
Very good.
Great minds think alike. So anyway, but we've been talking with local companies. Actually, I just received an email today about some other alternatives that we can do for students that don't have internet, because through the summer, through, what was it, June 15th, I believe, they did offer free internet. That's not the case, But we do have some plans coming forward there. I know Matt's talked with Verizon and some other local companies too for maybe some hot spots as well. So there's plans in place. We're kind of on their timeline. They're trying to figure things out themselves as well. So we're working with that. Another thing is the distribution of Chromebooks. We offered that this spring, which went really well. I think we're just trying to figure out a better plan, because the problem we ran into is, there's multiple kids in a household. And I think that was the biggest, I know like with mine, it ended up being, an issue of whose time was it on the electronics, and not to play games, but do schoolwork. So, that's something that we're gonna work out too, and we'll have a great plan with that in place. And fourth thing that we are working with is training our teachers. So I think this is a great deal. We are gonna have some training at the end of July. Teachers, I hope you're excited. I know I am, and we have a lot of great opportunities for you to learn different things from Google, and we're just going to be, the whole district is going to be operating through Google, so that'll be really great for, I know, Matt on his side with everything, and as well for the teachers. So it's just one thing at one time. So any questions about technology? Oh, one more thing too, and Matt's also working and doing a really good job about helping the teachers figure out who's using what electronic, make sure everything's clean and safe for our students as well. So,
Do you want to talk about that a minute, Matt? Just the getting material back.
So one of the things that we've been looking at is, get it turned on here. Is using, well, okay, doesn't matter, turned on. Instead of using wipes and disinfectant, which is a real danger with electronics, if you get them too wet, and then the keyboards and things stop working. So I talked to several companies, and this is a UV light disinfectant. And so we've been demoing one of these, and basically you just hit a button and go slowly over a device, and we're looking at like keyboards and commonly touched surfaces, things like that, as a way to not have as much, paper waste, buy all those wipes and things like that, that we can, put one of these, if it's a Chromebook card at the middle school or something like that, every time a student uses it, puts it away, somebody's job is to do this, or it can just set on top of the cart and kind of help reduce those, the bacteria and virus and everything else on commonly touched areas. So we're kind of looking at that. One thing that, as far as internet, I just want to mention that we did have some students who maybe had a Chromebook or a laptop, but they didn't have internet at their home. And Verizon has been really good about working with us and getting, if you have a good cell phone signal, but there's no way that VAST or Midco is going to run a wire out to you, Verizon has been really good about working with us to say, hey, we can offer some hotspots at a pretty reduced rate for those students, or the district can, take on those fees or however we want to do that. But there was rural areas that really didn't have access to technology. That was a real hurdle for some students. We're kind of working on a plan. Hopefully that'll take care of that.
Thank you. We're going to have Kathy Wagner come up, make some comments about the health safety, which Sarah Lawrence and Rachel Sarda have been part of that group as well. They are two of our nurses. And while Kathy's coming up, I'll let everybody know that we are going to use some federal grant money to hire 2 additional part-time nurses. And we've got that ad out. We've got some applicants, and we'll be making those hires soon, because we know that we're going to be really busy in the school, which we are anyway, without the COVID-19. But with 2 additional nurses part-time, we think that will be very helpful.
Agreed. And, as we move into the fall, I just sat in on the COVID meeting, local meeting today with emergency management. And, one of the concerns is the symptoms are similar, whether it's cold, flu, or COVID. And so I know the clinic, the hospital, they're working on ways to prepare for that. I think one of the main things is we found that we need to keep close communication with the CDC guidelines, Department of Health, National Nurses Association, and also our local doctors. I will say that the one good thing about having a mumps outbreak last year was we did learn from it. And we learned how we are going to work with the Department of Health to move forward on if there are cases and what steps they help walk schools through that. So that communication is very important. And like I said, if there's one good thing about that, that was it. We want to make sure that we're communicating with parents before school starts, to send out messages, just so that parents and staff know what the signs and symptoms are. And we will be reviewing those in the school with students as well, but that's something that we want parents to go through that checklist before sending their students to school. It's difficult, because I know you want to send your student to school, and if they are running a fever, I know it's easy to just give them a Tylenol and send them to school. But the way things are right now, we want you to know that we need to make that good decision, and maybe see your health provider. Communication with staff. One of the things that we're putting together is a flow chart. Something simple. If someone is test positive, what are the steps we're going to take from there? And each teacher, each classroom will have this, and so that it makes sense, it's easy to follow, because it gets pretty complicated on how many days this person has to be out. Is it 10 days? Is it 14 days? Who were they sitting with? The tracing, making sure that we know what other students they came into contact with. That's going to be a big piece of this health and safety. There were a number of other recommendations, just, those are things that we're going to have to talk about with staff, making sure that we might go back to water bottles. I know those were out, but we might have to bring those back in just for the sake of safety. A lot of the other things that we talked about, washing hands, that can't be said enough, obviously. But a lot of that's going to be coordinating within the school building and timing of bathroom breaks. It's going to take a lot longer. There might be 2 or 3 sinks, and they need to wash for 20 seconds, and all those things are going to be very important, and we're going to have to time those things out. Nurses will work closely with classroom teachers. And we talked a little bit about cleaning guidelines as well, like cleaning surfaces at school and things that might need to be done. We can't just wait till the end of the school day to do it. Just often wipe down doorknobs, things like that, so that we are doing what we can as the day progresses. So, do you have anything else? Did anybody have any questions? I think this is going to be a bit of a moving target as well, just because there are some things that are changing along the way, what guidance there is out there for us. So the good thing is we have enough contacts with state and national and local, so it should be good.
Will there be building entrance processes in place for staff and students? Has that been discussed yet?
We originally, I'm going to take you back to our thought process through this, but initially we were thinking, one of the nurses thought maybe to take everybody's temperature as they're coming in, but that might not be realistic for every building. There's a lot of kids coming in, and have them come through one door. As we thought through that, in one of our last meetings, we decided that we really want to keep kids separate. So separate them, have them coming in numerous doors. It's going to have to, we haven't really talked about taking temperatures on every student. So far that hasn't been something that we had planned to do. Obviously monitoring if some of the symptoms, and I think there's going to be a lot of worry, if there's a cough. I think we all are like that. If we don't want to cough out loud in front of anybody, because then they think you have a symptom. But that's where the extra nurses are going to be coming in handy, I think, to help monitor some of those things. 2 nurses are very, very busy in 6 buildings on a normal year. And I think it's critical that we have additional nurses, so it's going to be a good addition.
When you say you talked about things, have these conversations developed into a concrete plan, or are these still a work in progress?
Yeah, it will be, and I think we generally have, it's not all down on paper. We have ideas down, and I want to have a flow chart make it very simple and clear. If you see this is when you can send them to the office. We might have thermometers in the classroom so that there's less movement. Classroom teachers take the temperatures in the classroom. I think we have ideas on how to start. We might find out that some of it isn't working very smoothly, so we might need to adjust. But I think that's to be expected. And my conversations are with the nurses and the admin team. And as I said, I sit in on a lot of webinars, listening to see what's happening.
So not to get too far ahead of this, but we will have a document that's being worked on right now that we will get out to the public and the school board, and it will have links that you can also link to, such as here's the recommendations from the Department of Health if we have a case in our building or cases. So you will see some of this information as part of that plan. And one of the things that, and I think you've all seen it, this is changing week by week, and people can't agree on what the right protocol might be on some things. So as a school, we don't want to be in the middle of that, but we want to do the best that we can. And I think that's what's really important for our parents and our community to understand, is that this is changing. And we're not going to get everything down on paper. If we tried, we might have a 300-page document, and then all you're doing is searching to find out, now, where did we put that? We want to make this as concise as we can and also allow some flexibility when things change, because they'll change from the CDC, Department of Health, opinions from physicians around the country and around the world. So yes, we'll have something put together, but it's going to be fluid as we move through this. And I think we'll learn more once we get started, and perhaps even do a better job as we get along the way.
I felt that way with the mumps. It was like, oh, how do you wrap your head around all these things that are going on inside the school? And it didn't take very long, and we kind of had a system going, and that was kind of on the fly too. We had to keep track of who hadn't been immunized and things like that. So, and so that's one of the things I know that I heard today in a call, was that I know immunizations for flu shots are going to be we're hoping that people will get flu shots. So no word on whether or not we're going to have any pod or anything like that though. So, okay.
Thank you, Kathy. The mental wellness piece, Andrea Wright is here. She's going to make some brief comments on that. And then if the next person, if, I guess Jason's up here, transportation, and then be followed by Derek, and we'll keep moving along here. Thank you, Andrea.
All right. Well, hello. As we've kind of gone through this whole COVID and the physical health importance too, we also have realized that our mental health is equally as important as our physical health. And so one of the things that myself and the other school counselors from elementary up on to high school have been working on is how do we make sure that we are meeting those social and emotional needs, like Mr. Klimish had talked about, for all of our students, regardless of what the school year looks like. And so we've been able to collaborate on a working document on how we're going to be able to meet with students safely if we go back to school on a regular basis, or what's going to happen too if we're out of school. How can we make sure that we are meeting those needs? And one of the things that we are very grateful in this community is that we are able to partner with some community agencies, and I think we found out that during March, when we had to go online all of a sudden, that we were able to partner up with that community agencies, mental health agencies, to make sure that those needs were being met if we weren't able to meet face-to-face with students. We've also talked about making sure that we're checking in on a regular basis with students, and we're very confident that we can meet all of those needs for the students as well. And so that is basically, what we've been doing as a team. We're also going to be working with teachers, admin, to make sure that if there are any referrals or anything to that nature, that we can make sure that we are checking in with those students. And bottom line is we want to ensure parents that we are there for you guys. If we're online schooling, we are going to be providing contact information for the school counselors as well as our office hours too. So that way, whether you're out of school, in school, whatever the situation may be, you can find us, you can contact us, and we're there for you. So that's kind of the gist of what we have been talking about with the mental health. But myself and the other counselors, several of us were able to attend some really good virtual mental health conferences this summer, and social and emotional well-being was brought up quite a bit. With the challenges of being at home, not only were parents stressed, but students were also stressed, and how do we deal with that? And they're all anxious to come back. And there's going to be a lot of feelings that come with that, and so we want to make sure that we're there for them for whatever may come up. So, are there any questions?
Erica, this might be a little bit out of scope, but is there anything being done to address or at least contemplate the well-being of staff in the school?
Yes, that is one of the things that, and I don't know if maybe Dr. Kindle can talk to this too, but one of the main concerns is because over this time, we heard even in the work groups too, is that staff has been, we want to make sure that the mental health of our staff is taken care of, because that is also important. If we're not healthy ourselves, it's hard to be there for our students too. And there are resources out there through our benefits and everything too for staff to get counseling services if needed. I think there's 3 sessions too, and they can also come to any of the school counselors as well if they need resources outside of those too. So I don't know if Dr. Kindle wants me to add
Yeah,
anything.
thank you. So we have an EAP, an Employee Assistance Program, through Avera, and that's available to any of our employees at no cost, and they do a really good job with their services, and we'll continue to remind our staff about that, and the fact that we have some really good people on staff that can work with them or direct them to our EAP.
Yeah, so yeah, that is one of our top priorities, not just our student and families' mental health, but also staff as well. So any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kendall, this isn't necessarily for Andrea, but probably going back to the schools and the buildings, attendance policy. I know we have a strict attendance policy, which is to ensure our students are in our schools. How will that be affected, or how will we incorporate that into all of
Yeah,
this?
so that's a really good question, and we have talked about that because we've got activities, which are affected by that. And one of the things that I think we've talked about and stressed regarding attendance is that we're going to need to be pretty flexible, knowing that, this is something that we've never dealt with and it's new territory, and we want kids to participate, we want kids to come to school. Also, opening up that option to parents where they can choose to bring their kids or to have them do our online learning. We know that we're just going to have to be flexible with the attendance part of it. And we'll work with parents and situations, and it's just unlike anything that we've ever had to deal with before. So it's a different setting, but we're going to work with parents. Jason.
Okay. Well, for transportation, as Dr. Kendall alluded to in the beginning here, transportation is going to be offered for the rural areas and the in-town stops, as we've done in the past. So our goal here in setting this forward, not knowing exactly what kind of schedules we're going to be dealing with, we're going to have our transportation schedules be pretty much the same as they were last year. So that means that in terms of planning, if we have to shift into a different schedule format, that families aren't going to be completely disoriented with massive shifts in their schedule at home. So our goal is to set this up in such a way that the schedules, regardless of what school schedules look like, the transportation schedule should be unchanged. Some sanitation things that we're talking about right now for measures on the buses would be before and after the routes, we're going to do some sanitation with some sprayers and things that we're also going to be doing in the classroom. Disinfectant on the buses, and we're going to have students highly encouraged to wear face coverings, and then drivers will be wearing face coverings. So those are some of the big ones. And then in terms of loading measures and how we're going to go about that is going to be to actually minimize crossover. We're going to load from the back to the front and try and seat our families together on the buses to the extent we can. As you can imagine, distancing on a bus is very difficult with just the sheer size. And so some of the CDC recommendations that have been put out have been to really emphasize the ventilation, which is easy enough to do in August and September, not so easy in November and December and the winter months. So we're looking into some exhaust fans and some other things that'll help circulate air and bring in fresh air from the outside. One of the biggest, takeaways for transportation is going to be a new procedure for this coming year, and that's going to be to sign up for bus service. All families will be asked to provide a waiver that we're going to provide in a mailing that's going out tomorrow, and it's an acknowledgement of risk that riding the buses is inherently going to be riskier than normal because of the COVID pandemic. So those letters will go out tomorrow, and families then, all families, regardless if they've signed up for service in the past, everyone will be, if the bus service is to be utilized, sign up for the new service and provide that waiver, and we'll provide a new bus pass then going forward. And then the other item of note on that, we're asking for an August 10th deadline on signups, which will also be included in the letter. I would just encourage all the families that want to take advantage of bus service to check the website. We've reevaluated all of our procedures and updated the website, so everything that I'm saying now would be reflected on there, including the necessary forms and waivers. And again, to reiterate that passes are going to be color-coded, so students will be identified as having signed up, have the waiver on file, they'll get a new bus pass, and then we'll get that out to them so it'll be identifiable for drivers. I think that kind of is the highlights of transportation, but again, it's going to look the same. We're going to provide the service to the extent that we can, and to reiterate that deadline, we're not saying you can't sign up for service after August 10th, but we're going to need a little extra time this year to plan and make sure that things are safe and we have a well thought out plan. Sign-ups that we receive after that date we'll handle on a case-by-case and get them on the routes as soon as we can, but likely after that first day of school. So questions from the board on that?
Thank you. One other thing I would add on the transportation, You know, one of the options we had was not to offer transportation. And we decided that that was just really not a good option, knowing that we have so many kids that need to get to school, not only in our rural areas, but starting the in-town busing 3-4 years ago, how successful that was, and it really reached out to a population of kids that found it difficult to get to school, and a lot of that had to do with their parents at what time they go to work in the morning. So we balanced that out and said that offering the transportation is what we need to do. And again, it's optional for parents to decide if that's what they want to do. Derek.
Good evening. I'm just going to touch on buildings and grounds very quickly because a lot of this is covered in some other areas like the health and safety that Kathy had talked about. It's going to fall a lot to our custodial staff that they're going to have to be doing these extra cleanings. You know, Kathy talked about the touching of the surfaces, you know, the door handles, the bathrooms. Those are things that we're going to have to work out. So what we're doing is we're going to bring in our custodians and make sure that we have custodial staff during the day. That's going to be pretty key for us, that we have somebody in the building at all time. Sometimes, typically, we would have a spot where there's not a custodian there and principals would fill in if need be, or other staff, but now we're going to say we're going to have that person there to do these daily cleanings. And some of the tasks that they're going to be, you know, having to do are, you know, obviously the daily cleanings, more wiping than they would typically do. They'll have to know what cleaners are they meant to use. You know, are they on the EPA list to make sure that we're using the right stuff? We want to make sure that they have adequate supplies, and that'll be my task as now to make sure that they have what they need to do the job. Hand sanitizer is going to be pretty big in all the schools. We've ordered a lot of that. That's in the buildings in some places. We're working on getting them installed. So one of the big things we did, we bought some electrostatic sprayers, and we're going to put those into use. So every school will have one of these sprayers. So what we really need to do is speed up cleanup time so that we're disinfecting fast, doing what we need to fast, so that they can get into an area and get out. So with this electrostatic sprayer, you'd be able to come into a theater like this and have one person that could walk through it in a half hour to 45 minutes, spray everything down, it would be disinfected instead of having to wipe and wipe and wipe, so saving time. You know, a couple other things, like we're putting up sneeze guards in entry offices, a lot of places where we have face-to-face interactions. So that's about it. Questions?
Will we be kind of facility use for non-school district purposes? Are we still limiting that, or what does that look like?
I don't know, maybe Dr. Kinley, you know more than I do about what
I can talk a little bit about that, and Ryan, you can jump in too from there. But that's something that we've worked really closely with the city on because it's a joint use facility. And as of right now, we have limited and restricted our rental use. And you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Ryan. But when we get to this fall, I think there's another meeting between now and the start of school with the city, and we will determine what that's going to look like for our facilities across the district. But we really locked it down pretty tightly since probably March, would you say, Ryan? Any other comment on that? Okay. All right, Sandy with food service.
Well, the first thing I'll tell you is we are planning on feeding kids. Now, how is another story, but we have some plans, and the first one, we set it up in kind of 3 plans. The first one will be cafeteria and classroom. Probably Dr. Yonke talked a little bit about dividing up half of the kids eating in the cafeteria and half in their classroom. Or the second plan, they'll be completely all eating in the classroom. And our third choice would be eating in the cafeteria. So we have these plans broke down, and it's on that working document that Dr. Kendall has been talking about that they'll be sharing. We might use one of these plans in the beginning of the year, and we might shift to another plan during the year as things progress. So, and it might even vary between lunch and breakfast and how we're doing that. Maybe they're eating, because of the less kids at breakfast, we might be serving them breakfast in the cafeteria, but lunch might be in the classroom. So just kind of depending on each situation. And because it's different at every grade level, I'll be working with the principals on what's best for their schools, because every school is kind of set up a little different. What we do decide, one thing we do know for sure is we will have more packaged items. There will be little or no touch service on things. We will be serving them, and a lot of things will be more prepared, and they will just be given them. There's going to be no salad bars or self-service where utensils will be used or shared. We'll be using more disposable items, and there will be less choices at mealtime in hopes of keeping it moving and less time for them to decide and think on things. We're really encouraging online free and reduced applications and online payments, so we don't have to handle a lot of cash, and that we get parents to do these things online, so it'd be easier for us. One of the things that Dr. Kendall talked about, the grab and goes, that if it goes where a child is enrolled and they do stay home and they want to come in and get a meal, they can, but they'll be following under the national school guidelines where either they're free or reduced or they'll be paid. We're hoping that we got a lot of waivers this summer. We're hoping for waivers that will help us be a little more lenient, and maybe looking at universal meals, kind of similar to what summer food has been doing through the school year. So we're waiting to find out about that. But as of now, there's no waivers yet, and we're going to be going just like we would during the school year. We'll do everything possibly we can to keep the kids fed and safe during this time, during the school day, and for our staff also. Any questions? I just want to mention that I think so far since we ended in March, we have served over 315,000 school meals so far as of today. So pretty proud of my staff. They've worked really hard this summer and during this time. Well, if no questions for me, I'll head down.
Thank you, Sandy. And then we have Ryan Morris with our activities.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for hanging in here. I know it's been a long hour and a half you've been listening to everybody talk, so I'll try to be brief and give you a little explanation on how we're doing things with activities. Back to the original question that was asked by Franny with the city, Jason Beets, myself, Todd Larson, and Brittany Orr from the city have had multiple Zoom meetings, and we decided together to come together as a city and a school to be on the same page, so that during the summer months, at least, as far as activities in the building from outside the community, people coming in, the high school is an important location, as Sandy just alluded to, serving over 300,000 meals. We did not want to have any rentals or extra people in the building that would potentially cause us to have to shut the building down because of an outbreak. So that was important for us to keep the building as isolated as possible throughout the summer months. So that's one of the main reasons we didn't allow any outside entities into the building during the summer. And as well as graduation, which is coming up here in a couple weeks. It's obviously a backup location for us to have graduation in the high school gym if the weather doesn't cooperate on July 26th. And if we had any activities in the building, we were afraid that either one of those two could be jeopardized. So that was our rationale behind that. And we will be meeting again here as we near August to start determining what direction to go as far as outside activities coming into our facilities over the next several months. And I guess that'll take me to the point, I won't go on forever, but I do want everybody to realize that activities are an important part of the school. We've got kids at the high school level, almost 80% of our kids are involved in some sort of activity. At the middle school, that percentage is even higher. And we had a lot of devastated kids in the spring when schools closed and activities were canceled. You have to understand that you're only a middle schooler or a high schooler for a short period of time in your entire lifetime. And when you miss out on opportunities like some of our kids did, that is really hard on them. And I know we heard about mental health with about how the whole school district works with mental health. We had a lot of kids who struggled mentally too with missing out on some very important things. We had kids who were cast to be in the spring play who never got to perform. Kids who were excited to go run track and participate at the state level for maybe the last time. Tennis players, golfers, kids who missed out on state basketball tournaments. There are things in the lives of our kids that were drastically changed by this. So as soon as we found out that school was going to be closed and activities were going to be done for the school year, we already started planning on how we can get our kids back involved in things because we know how important that is to them. So one thing that I began to work on with my colleagues across the state who are also obviously ADs, we started working on a plan with the Activities Association of how we could re-implement our kids back into activities during the summer months. And we spent the good part of May working on how we could safely get kids back into doing things. And we also used guidelines from the National Federation of High School Sports, which oversees the South Dakota High School Activities Association. And we put a phased plan together with the help of Dr. Piedla, Dr. Hiltonen, as well as running it past the school board to make sure our kids could get back involved with things. And we started that on the 15th of June, and it was a 3-phased plan. And the first phase was for the first 2.5, 3 weeks of the summer up until the 4th of July when there's a moratorium that the South Dakota High School Activities Association has. And we made it through phase 1 by being very cautious. Basically, we had all of our kids working out independently. They were in groups of only 10. They were unable to share equipment with each other, but they were able to get in and do things. And the majority of our coaches provided that opportunity to our student athletes. And now that we are into the month of July, we have gone into phase 2, and that has allowed us to have a little bit bigger groups outside, and it's allowed us to keep the same number of kids in pods and smaller groups inside, but it's allowed them to start sharing equipment such as volleyballs or basketballs or soccer balls. So that's been a help for them to gradually work their way toward normalcy, we hope. And right now, during the month of July, the South Dakota High School Activities Association has put a task force together, and they are trying to determine the best way to allow the students in South Dakota to begin normalcy again once we get to August. As some of you may or may not be aware, August 3rd is the official start date for many of our fall activities, and August 3rd is not so far away. The High School Activities Association is going to give schools their guidance and recommendations the week of July 20th, so we are eagerly and anxiously awaiting the guidelines that they give us, and then it'll be up to each and every school to work those guidelines out as to how we can continue with activities and provide those special things for our students. And it's also going to be important that the schools of the similar size, like the AA schools, for example, who compete against each other, that we are all on the same page, because we can't have different things going on when our teams go to Mitchell versus when they go up to Brookings versus when they're here in Yankton. So I know the superintendent groups, the large group superintendents have been talking about this, as have my group of ADs. We all want to be on the same page, and we want to work together with the state to provide our kids opportunities that we know are once in a lifetime for these kids, and they're going to be gone before they know it. So we're doing everything we can to provide them with the opportunities that they deserve and that they should have. So questions for me at all?
Brian, so the decisions on the particular sports will all be from South Dakota Athletic Association or the Activities Association. They'll make the final say, and then you just.
Right, so there are so many avenues to explore with this. So the South Dakota High School Activities Association has told us to be patient. They've got a committee, like I said, it has 15 to 20 people on it. It varies from superintendents to principals to activities directors, and it's to try to determine what is the safest way for our kids to be able to participate, because they understand the importance of our kids being involved with things, and missing out on things is hard on them and their families. So yeah, Sarah, that's a great question. We will get guidance from them. They will give us recommendations and suggestions as to how we can safely proceed throughout our seasons, throughout the fall, hopefully into the winter and through the spring again. And it'll be our responsibility as school districts to do our best to follow those and keep our kids involved all year long with minimal interruption. So looking forward to how they tell us to do it, but right now it's kind of a lot of unknown, but we're just waiting patiently here for another couple weeks, and then obviously we'll have a real small window of time between the week of July 20th and the August 3rd timeline to start implementing this and getting our plans worked out. We've got ideas on what we think we can do, but right now we're kind of waiting for that final word of guidance from the Activity Association.
I think it's important to note too, and I talked to Ryan this afternoon, I was part of a meeting regarding this, that as, for instance, the ESD group, for our activities, based upon what we hear from this task force, we're going to have to agree on some things. And I'm just going to let people know right now, there is a good chance that, for instance, fall football at Crane is not going to look the same way that it has in the past, possibly. Matter of fact, there might be recommendations that it's a ticketed event with so many tickets per player, or I don't know what the, but as a conference, we're going to have to agree on what that's going to look like so that Brookings isn't doing it one way, Aberdeen another, Yankton another. And so as long as this is taken tonight, this agenda item, I hope what you'll walk away from that is there are a lot of decisions being made. And we have spent our entire summer working on the things that we talked about tonight. And another aspect is just what Ryan's talking about, and that's activities. How are we going to do the activities, which are right around the corner? And we have some good ideas and some thoughts, but we're going to learn more in the next couple of weeks.
I think it's important to know that the way you knew, and we all knew an activity, whether that was going to the spring play where this whole venue's full, or going to a basketball game or a football game, things probably are not going to look the way they did for the time being. So we all have to be aware of that. And we do have the ability to live stream our events, so I think that's a huge plus. If you're not able to attend in person, you can obviously watch things online. So we're going to do our best to get as many people there as possible, but we will obviously have to adhere to what the rest of the state says that they recommend for us. Anything else for me?
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to close out on this a little bit, and then I think our board chair is going to open it up for any questions that anybody might have. So we've talked about a lot of things tonight, and a lot of people have asked me, well, what can we do? What can we do to help? And I think the most important thing is that as we have conversations about this, like tonight and Thursday, and as we begin the school year, is to be respectful of each other, be supportive of the school district. We have to work together as a community, parents, and school district to get through this. There really are some better days ahead for all of us, but we're in some tough times right now, and we'll get through this. Right now, we are modeling for our children through our actions and words how we can work for them. They are the common denominator and what is most important in our decision making. So, sign up to be a substitute teacher. If you've never done it before and you've thought about it, we might need subs. We've already had some subs that have backed away from subbing, and we have to have teachers in the classroom. We have to have substitutes. If you want to do something and you're interested, we'll take you as a substitute teacher. I want to thank Dr. Pietla, who's here tonight. Again, Dr. Scott Hiltonen for their guidance and professionalism along this whole ordeal that we've been faced with. I want to thank our local healthcare workers, our emergency responders, our law enforcement, and our essential workers. And I want to thank all of our employees in the school district for what you've done, our school board for being supportive, and I just can't say enough about what our team has done in this district, which includes all of you. We're really blessed to be part of this community. So thank you for coming tonight. We have a few more agenda items, but our board chair will finish this part of it out.
Well, I just want to thank you, everybody that's come and spoke for all your hard work. And it's very obvious that there are so many moving parts and so much to still be here. And I guess the more and more time we have, and the more and more guidance we have, I think some of our anxiety will go down and be more specific. While we typically do not do this, we are going to open up for public comment. Just a reminder that we are going to have another meeting similar to this on Thursday night for the entire public to come and ask whatever questions they have. I know as board members, we have lots If you do have an input, you're welcome to come. We have a microphone for you. Ask that you limit your comments to less than 3 minutes. Would anybody like to speak?
We've got a portable mic here, so you don't have to get on the stage. Thank you.
We'll just hold it. So I'm Dr. Pietala. I've been working with Dr. Kindle, Dr. Hilton, and building these guidelines. And they come from the CDC and the Academy of Pediatrics. And they're well researched. And you know, our goal as physicians responsible for the health of our community is to get our kids into the school. We really want that to happen. We know it's disruptive to their lives and to our lives as parents and community members when they're not in school. And so we can do this, and we can do it safely and effectively, but we got to do it all working together for that common goal. It's got to be about what's best for the most of us, not just for individuals. And these are not just rules that are made up to limit our freedoms or our life. They're meant to keep us safe, and they're based on science and good reasoning and logic. And they might change. I know some people get frustrated when recommendations go from you don't need to wear a mask to masks are recommended. That is the way this pandemic works and all pandemics work. We're learning day by day, week by week. We're doing a great job in Yankton. We really are. And if we can keep working together, we'll continue to do a really good job. Does anyone have specific questions for me regarding some of these recommendations to keep our kids safe?
This is probably a good point to ask the question. Do we have a certain point where we say, we've had too many cases, we need to shut it down?
Yeah, so the Department of Health has a flow chart that Dr. Kendall kind of pointed out earlier on how to handle specific cases within the schools. And then we are continuously monitoring in Yankton and hopefully to the specific school districts what the total positive rate for cases are and what the community spread is looking like. Right now there's no specific guideline. It's a matter of trying to use common sense. The flow chart from the Department of Health I think is a pretty good one and gives guidelines to the school district, but we monitor the community. Yeah, there might be a point when we say, right now community spread is widespread in Yankton County, and so it's not likely to get suddenly worse. In fact, it might be trending towards slightly better, but we'll be monitoring that on a day-by-day basis. And so there isn't a certain threshold, but I'll have conversations with Dr. Kindle and any of you that would like almost daily if necessary.
Any other questions from the audience? I have a question for you as far as the state goes. I know in the spring, obviously there was a governor's order, to shut down the school. In lieu of that, do we have the right is, or whatever it is. It is our decision locally to stop and start school whenever we want to. We do have that purview.
Yeah, when this started in March and our governor shut the schools down, she does have that prerogative to do that, to close the schools. And but I also know that since that time that there's been a real strong movement to put this back in the hands of school boards and communities so that we can decide when the right time is to open and when we might need to close. And as Dr. Pietla said, we are going to have to communicate about this. We are going to have cases. We're going to have kids that test positive. We're probably going to have staff that test positive. And we're going to have to quarantine people. And we're going to have to take it case by case, perhaps classroom by classroom, building by building, to determine what closes and what stays open. And I know you heard a lot too tonight about this online plan and the take-home packets. I think what's important to walk away with tonight is that if we have to make that decision, we're ready to do that, and we're ready to have our kids still have an educational program for them to learn. And I think that's what's really important, that we continue to provide that. And I'll just say this, that I'm not going to be afraid to make a decision. And some of you might not agree with that decision, but we're going to make it and we're going to move forward. And I just want people to respect the fact that it's not easy. I bet I get a packet of stuff of 30 pages deep every day about how to do something differently. And so I'm going to do the best job that I can. Our teachers will, our administrators, our school board, our healthcare people. Please try not to be critical. Be helpful. Be constructive with us. We really need your help, and we need to get through this together. I've never been through this before. Don't ever want to go through it again. But we can get through this, and we can do the best that we can for our kids and our staff.
Okay, so we have this is the annual process that we go through for the school budget. The timeline sets up in the spring of each year. After the legislative session, we put together a preliminary budget, and according to statute, we present our first draft of that budget in May. Well, as we all know, this year's timeline has been disrupted, but we did do the preliminary budget in May, and right now there's still a little bit of uncertainty. However, things have kind of started to take shape. We haven't seen this year's state aid come in yet. However, we're expected that by the end of the month. So this year, the hearing then will move forward tonight with an opportunity for the public to ask any questions of the preliminary budget, which was published on Saturday's Press and Dakotan. And if there are questions, we'll be happy to address those now. Otherwise, the timeline then, the next steps in our cycle will be to present that budget for your consideration at the August school board meeting, along with recommendation for levy set points. So I guess at this point, it would be appropriate to open it up for anyone from the audience who wishes to be heard.
Do we have any public input? Hearing none, this is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to conduct the 2020-2021 school district budget hearing and set adoption date for August 10th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call please, Jason.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Moving on, item number 12, request for consideration of pickup points. We're talking about the Gayville Volun pickup and drop-off points. Wayne, do you want to discuss that?
You know, I don't have much to say about it. This is, has been a yearly request for the past few years, and there's really nothing different than they're asking from last year, other than one less pickup drop-off point.
I move we approve the Gale Valens school bus pickup drop-off points for the 2021 school year as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call please, Jason.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Our next agenda item is about the school resource officer, the agreement between the city and Yankton School District for a second resource officer.
I would just make some real brief comments on this. We are happy to announce that, just like we talked about at our opt-out discussions, that we want to add a second resource officer. We're going to do that. And the added news here is that The city and the school partnered on a COPS grant. We are going to receive the COPS grant. It's a multi-year grant. It phases out, so after year 3 or 4, you know, you lose part of the grant. But the good news is that what we had budgeted for it won't cost as much as what we had anticipated. And so we will have an additional resource officer, and that school resource officer is Officer Dylan Wilson. And he will be right alongside Officer Chrissy. Officer Chrissy will be at the high school, Officer Wilson at the middle school, and they'll work together.
All right, seems like Chief Harris had to leave at this time. All right, this is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agreement with the city for 2 school resource officers.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please, Jason.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. All right, item number 14 is Summer Projects Progress Report. This is a report from Derek Bones.
So our summer projects, of course, we got off to a good start because we had a little extra time, so we're making a lot of good progress. The high school painting was a big project, the north 1/3 of the building, that's been completed. Rocky Johnston was a painter, and he's just finishing up punch list items now. The other big item up here at the high school was the corridors, the carpeting. That has been completed, and Mozax is finishing up the punch list items on there. And if you walk out tonight, you can take a look at it. It looks a lot nicer than the old blue stuff. The middle school, the 8th grade bathrooms is our other big project. That work continues. We have ceramic tile being installed on the floor and the walls right now. Next week will be acoustical ceilings, then plumbing and electrical. We should be really close to completion by July 31st, if everything stays on schedule. Beetle, that was the one that kind of got thrown at us with the water leak. Moving slower than I anticipated. We're working with the contractor, pushing him, trying to get that going so we're ready in the basement by the time school starts. Just other minor, the middle school, we did parking lot repairs in the back, and that's been completed. Questions?
All right, hearing no questions. Did want to thank you for your service, as this probably will be your last school board report. But thank you for everything that you have done for the district. The next agenda item, appointing standing committees, we will postpone until next meeting, so I have a chance to talk to everybody about their preferences. And then our final agenda item is number 16, adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Matt, thank you for having all this done. We'll have the same setup there.